And welcome everyone to the Rise Above Heartless Materialism podcast. This is the second official episode. We're still getting started. Back with me today is Laurence Gonzaga, who works in the behavioral health field. He's also a kind of dabbles a lot in the Catholic cultural sphere, if you will, just like sociologically and psychologically. And he's very aware of all the different Catholic influencers out there. And today, I wanted to talk about Catholic culture, or you could also say, if not the traditionalists or even like the Eastern Rite Catholic culture, then what other choice do you have? Like, is there a viable alternative? We bring up the question because both of us have been trad in the past, and now we have kind of like tentative relationships with that. I like the term trad adjacent, as coined by Cale Zeldin. It's a very descriptive term of how I feel, because basically, like, there are so many good things going for the traditionalist movement, but there's like certain, like, I don't know what you call it, like glitches, or I don't know if pathology might be too strong a word, but maybe not in some instances. There's just things that like make me like want to like hesitate to just like jump in with both feet. And so our conversation today will largely be around like what's the alternative? What does like true Catholic culture look like? So I'll ask you the question, Laurence. What, if not the traditionalist Catholic culture or the Byzantine, Eastern Catholic culture, then what's left? What do we have? I would, and I phrase it that way because, like, I don't know if you could call like Novus Ordo culture really a culture. It's more like just kind of like blending in with the zeitgeist a little bit in most scenarios. Now, there's a handful of parishes that really do have something special going on, and there's like really like vibrant, but they seem to be in like the minority. So what do you think, Laurence? And Laurence is in black and white today. Yeah, I don't know if it's by accident or design, but we look he's got that 1950s gravitas to him today. So,
well, I'm too much. I'm not technically a boomer, but in technology, sometimes I am, because I was playing around with the settings, and this is one of the filters, and I couldn't find how to revert back to the original. So this is what we have today. So
cool.
Hopefully it works out. Hopefully it works out. I'm trying not to be, I'm not, just trying to please everybody. That's definitely not my personality. To try to please everyone or not say anything of any value because it will upset some folks. But I traveled the spectrum of a lot of Catholic subcultures enough in my 20 years since being back in the church. After a time being an atheist and, sort of nominally Catholic, being raised sort of culturally Catholic, but not really doctrinally or intellectually Catholic. So, I've done it all, I guess, or not necessarily done it all, but I've tasted all the flavors in a sense, right? So I've done the life team thing. I did the sort of rad trad thing. I did the trad thing and then a little bit of the rad trad. I was almost a state of Acanthus at some point, or at least, flirting with that possibility. I went to a charismatic prayer group one time. Definitely was not a thing for me. Speaking in tongues and all that stuff. But more power to him if that's a legit or whatever. It's not my place to judge that. And ever since I did the Opus Dei thing, so. And I've kind of just been on the outskirts in the last 10 or 15 years, just kind of being on the outside looking in at traditionalism and all these other things. So when you say the Novus Ordo culture, I mean, my initial instinct would be there is a Novus Ordo culture, but what that means in my mind is the Novus Ordo that I've experienced, right? So it's and if you're a roaming Catholic like I am, and I go to different kind of Novus Ordos depending on my schedule of the weekend or whatever. I go to different parishes, and there is nuanced differences between the parishes. I mean, you could probably say there is the general Novus Ordo culture, only because you from a ex traditionalist mindset, you do think of it in that contrast, right? There's the traditionalist culture, and there is the not traditionalist culture, which is the rest of the Catholic Church, right? And it's overly generalized at times, and it's just, and when you talk to a traditionalist, they'll tell you, oh, it's the women, it's the girl altar servers, it's the extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion, communion in the hand, you can't kneel and all this. It's just it's the general list that they go down, which they hated or didn't like from the Novus Ordo when they left it. To them, that's what that culture is. If you used to read the New Oxford Review, it's still a thing. People still read that magazine, but they would make fun of like, oh, sister pantsuit, or the parish that's led by the nun who has not progressed since the 1970s or whatever, in their pantsuits and not wearing a habit and stuff like that. It's overly generalized. You don't see a lot of that stuff as much as you did in the 2000s and the 90s, but it still lingers in the mind of people who've left the Novus Ordo. So what is the Novus Ordo culture? I mean, I think you're right. It is sort of just normal people in that sort of sociological ecosystem that you're talking about or you're looking at, and they just go to mass. They identify as Catholic, and that's what and that's what that culture is, right? So I would imagine you might agree that there is a Southern California-ish Novus Ordo culture, and I said Novus Ordo, Anglo Novus Ordo culture, English-speaking culture, and then there's a Northern California one. There's probably a Nebraska Anglo Novus Ordo culture. Now, when I experience the Spanish Mass, and I go to that pretty often, because I'm not socialized in Hispanic culture, I probably cannot identify the nuanced differences between the Spanish Mass here and the Spanish Mass 2 towns over, or Northern California or Nebraska. I don't know if they have Spanish Masses over there. I imagine there's at least a few.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense what I'm saying? Like when you are immersed in a culture, you're familiar with the nuances. But when there's a culture that's sort of foreign to you and you only experience it sporadically, you notice the nuanced differences much less. You're less likely to notice the nuanced differences. So to me, honestly, every Spanish Mass I've been to is pretty much very similar. It's similar kind of music, similar kind of mannerisms, similar kind of ethos, or I don't know what you'd say, the feeling of the culture. And that's because I don't understand their culture very well. I don't notice that. Just, if you were to ask me the difference between norteñas music and mariachi music, I couldn't tell you the difference. They both sound the same to me.
Right.
But for the people who have the trained ear, or from that culture, they know, because it has the trumpets, or it has the accordion, or it has this, and it comes from that culture. Well, accordion, where did the accordion come from? That's not from Spanish culture. Because there was colonizers from, I don't know, some other European. And I only learn those things when people tell me about the history of those kinds of music. I don't know. I'm going in this tangent, but I think you're getting the point of what I'm saying. Is like I don't think there is such a thing as Catholic. Like when we think Catholic culture, we think about those kind of things, but it's like it's different in different places. Even the traditionalist cultures. I mean, when you go to an SSPX chapel, it feels different than an FSSP chapel or church, and it feels different than an Institute of Christ the King. It's still the same mass, but there's just a different kind of culture because different kinds of folks seem to be attracted. I mean, if all of those things are available in a town, I'm just going to be overly broad here. You go to an Institute of Christ the King, there's just kind of an elevated culture there.
Mhm.
I don't know what it is. Somebody could probably be more descriptive of what that nuance is. But I feel like the institute's a little fancier than the Fraternity of St. Peter. I hope I'm
Yeah.
not. I hope I'm not insulting anybody. I'm just saying that I feel like my experience of FSSP culture, Fraternity of St. Peter culture, they're sort of like normal working class ish. I mean Latin mass, but it's not like too much smoke or too much lace or too much. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, and I am being overly general, but I feel like there is, in my experience, a very different flavor between those, and it's certainly SSPX, because there is that sort of closed off culture where they don't integrate really with the Novus Ordo Catholics at all. I mean, unless there's family members, and so they're kind of detached, like unaware of what's going on at the Novus Ordo, or unaware of what's going on at the mainstream church, and they don't care. I mean, they're just living out their Catholic life at the SSPX chapel. Does that? I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. So there's the differences are far more varied than we might imagine, basically. Yeah,
Um,
I would say that that makes sense. There's definitely subcultures. Although I have to say that the Novus Ordos, um, based on my own experience, like going to mass in Lincoln, going to mass in Omaha, going to mass in Chicago at Novus Ordos, like there, I would say there's consistencies, but obviously it does vary from parish to parish. Like I know in Omaha, there's one parish at the was it the 9:30 mass where the music is basically like a bad Broadway production. But then there's also another parish in Omaha, Novus Ordo Parish, where the pastor tries to they have an organ, so they use the organ quite a bit, and it's much more of a much more traditional mass, and then you have like the Novus Ordos are just like somewhere in between, it's just like they don't they don't make a noise in either direction. They're just kind of like there. Um, but I think one of the reasons I pick on the Novus Ordo is that oftentimes there's and not always, like it depends on the parish you go to, like I say, but sometimes it seems like in comparison to say an FSSP parish or an institute parish, there's a certain kind of like lethargy to it. And when I think of like building an intentional culture, I think energy and also like a certain amount of exclusivity, because if you're going to say yes to something, you have to say no to something else.
Mhm.
And so I guess that's why I raised the question of like, okay, the traditionalists, depending on which flavor it is, they're saying yes to something. They have they're drawing like clear boundaries. There's no like ambiguity, and they're making their outlines very detailed and very defined. And so they have energy that they work towards that goal, and they have exclusivity. They're saying no to other things. So my question is like, if that sort of like approach to culture is healthy, if it's good to build like that, but if we're like saying like, yeah, the traditionalist culture is not for us, maybe the Eastern culture isn't for us, although I happen to personally like both Eastern right. If it's not for us, then what's the alternative? And I struggle to I struggle to find an adequate alternative most of the time in the Novus Ordo. Like that's not to say that they don't do things. Like there's different programs and such, but there's like I think even if they sometimes get the energy right, I think like I don't know, I think there's other aspects to culture that I'm not like articulating right now, and I'm not quite sure what they are. But does any of that make sense? Like there's like something in the Novus Ordo that's generally lacking that I usually find in um, that you usually find in the Latin Mass or in the Eastern Rite. And I think maybe it's like and maybe we can talk about this, like, is that sort of like exclusivity actually a good thing?
Mm.
Which is a very big question, because you can say like, well, okay, in order to build like a healthy, vigorous culture, yeah, you have to say no to different things. And so that really helps you focus on building something really great.
Mhm.
Like for example, like you think of like an ethnic culture, like, I don't know, Latvia or Poland. They have a very defined culture. But if you're gonna say like, okay, yes, we have our own national culture, then you have to like say no to like the cultures that immigrants might bring in, for example. Like say maybe somebody from Morocco moves to Poland. It's like, well, no,
Mhm.
sorry, like we have our own culture. Like if you want to live here, you have to adapt to us, not we adapt to you,
Mhm.
kind of thing. Um, and the fruits of that are just absolutely beautiful. The artwork, it's all got like the central unified theme around it. But I think the downside is that sometimes you can just like look down on people who are outside of that culture. And sometimes, in the Catholic world, we've talked about this before, like you can say, okay, people who are outside of our defined culture are actually like um sinful, or even like you could even call them, some might even go to the degree that say they're heretical if they don't fall like within this kind of like
Mhm.
particular culture. So I don't know, what is your educated thought on,
Um,
like the pros and cons of like having like a very like tight knit, close, unified culture, as opposed to like a more like, which is what I think of the Novus Ordos. It's like, it's more like, well, we don't want to say a lot of no's because we want to just like include the most amount of people. So like, I don't know, what's the pros and cons on that?
um, well, I mean, you use the term exclusivity, and I was thinking about like, that's a matter of perspective, right? What is inclusivity versus exclusivity? Because there's an aspect of exclusivity where when you are in the circle, it feels inclusive in
Hmm.
the sense that you feel part of the group. You're in the group. You want to be, you aspire to be like the folks that you look up to in that community. Let's say you're a baby trad, right?
Hmm.
And you just recently discover the TLM, and you're like, wow, they know all the Latin responses, they chant beautifully. I want to be like that, right? So you're sort of, you're on the outside, but then now you're on the inside, and now you're in on the secret, if you will.
Hmm.
But now you need to move up the ranks, if you will, like sociologically, right, and become more integrated into that culture or subculture. So there is a feeling of inclusivity there, right? Because once you're accepted into the group, the people want you there. Because they want you to do stuff. They want you to run the donut table, or they want you to do the. It just makes sense. They want you to be participatory in in the community, right? So there's the
Hmm.
inclusivity there, but before there's the inclusivity, I mean, it's assumed we're different from others.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a judgment. It's not necessarily that you're necessarily saying you're better than other folks, but they're saying this is our thing, and it's different from the other thing. That's why you're attracted to this thing, because we're different from the other thing,
Yeah.
right? Why are you driving an hour to come to our thing if we're not also acknowledging there's a difference? And in some sense, there's a better. And I don't mean better than people, but better for you, better subjectively.
Hmm.
Like you get something out of this Gregorian chant. You get something out of this silence and this perception of reverence, however you define it. You get something out of it. It does something for you, right? And people will use the terms to try to make it sound like it's all intellectual and spiritual, and just say, oh, it's not about me. It's not about you hear them saying this, right? It's not about me, it's about God and all this stuff. Yeah, but it's kind of about you, because you tell me you love the Gregorian chant. You tell me you love the smells and the bells and the lace and the grace and all this other stuff. That's talking about you, is it not?
Hmm.
So I feel like it's this mental, I don't know if it's gymnastics, but it's just like this mental self brainwashing just to pretend as if nothing of what's attracting you to the traditionalist movement is anything subjective. They like to talk about, I mean, the folks like to talk about how it's all objective and it's grace and God led me here and all this stuff. I don't buy it.
Hmm.
I used to talk like that too, but I really don't buy it when you take a step back out and you look at it like, okay, what is it? How did you even get here? Well, somehow somebody hurt you at the Novus Ordo, or somehow something was distasteful at the Novus Ordo, and then you start looking around and you start searching, and then you find this thing, and you feel at home somehow, right? Um,
Hmm.
but people do the same thing both directions. There are people who leave traditionalism because they feel something lacking there. They might have been raised in it, they might have liked it for a long period of time, but then they feel something's lacking, and they find a nice conservative Novus Ordo parish, or they find the ordinary, and they say, "This is what I'm looking for. This is what I was always looking for, but I didn't know it existed because 15 years ago the ordinariate didn't exist." Right?
Hmm.
And I say that pretty often. I said, if the ordinariate existed, this kind of liturgy existed in 2004 when I discovered the Latin Mass, I probably wouldn't have gone to the Latin Mass. I probably would have just said, hey, this is good enough. This
Hmm.
is conservative enough, or this is seemingly what Vatican II was asking for, more so than going back to 1962.
Hmm.
It That's just my opinion. But that's my, what do you would say? That's my sensibilities, right? So that's me. I mean, somebody like DPK or Dr. Kwasniewski, or anybody that follows in that kind of mindset, it's no question about it. The only way forward is to go back, or I don't know if you'd say it that way, but the only way forward is not improving the Novus Ordo. He has a book about that. It's not about with the workshop's over. I think that's what it's called. Workshop's done.
Yeah.
It's going back to 62 and building upon that and move that forward.
Hmm.
Um, hey, that's part of the marketplace of ideas. If enough people start backing that and the culture shifts that way, great. I'm all for it. But if it doesn't gain any traction, I mean, we had after Benedict XVI and Summorum Pontificum, if the time where it was to grow was that time, and it did grow. The TLM grew for sure. More Latin masses, more people were exposed to it, but not really significantly. I mean, yes. I mean, but it's not like it wasn't every parish. People weren't clamoring for the TLM. Um, I just know what we were doing in our diocese. I don't know if I said this at the last interview, but here, here's a practical issue that we experienced when we started a Latin Mass in Paris, because I was a president of Una Voce San Bernardino, and we started a Latin Mass in Paris, California, and we had like 150 people show up to the first Mass. And then after every mass thereafter, it started dwindling. It started going away, and it hovered around 50 for about 7 years consistently. Never beyond 50, really. Nothing significant beyond 50. Why? Because there was already a Latin mass established for 25 years that most people went to. And the only reason why they went to our 150, first mass, whatever, is because it might be closer to them. They were curious. They wanted to support the Latin Mass, but at the end of the day, they felt more connected to where they were going for 25 years. So they went back to that, even if
Hmm.
it's an hour away. They went back to that. And then that community didn't want to really support the new Mass. Why? Because if we offer a new Mass for the locals, it's going to take away from their numbers. It's going to take away from their leaders. It's going to take away from their, I
Hmm.
don't know what you call it, donations or whatever you call it, the tithes and resources. Because if their priest is sick, they need to draw from the reserve Latin Mass priests that are available that know the Latin Mass. But now if we have another established Latin Mass regularly, we're fighting for the same resources.
Hmm.
So there's very practical, limitations as to why Latin Masses were successful or not successful. At the end of the day, you really need the interest to come from that parish, right? That parish in Paris, California, I don't know, 95% Hispanic. If there's no natural interest in the Hispanic community for the Latin Mass, it's not going to grow
Hmm.
because those are the locals. So the rest of us were refugees driving 30 minutes an hour to start this new Mass, new Latin Mass. And it lasted 7 years, but at the end of the day, it was easy to just, it went away because the new pastor did not prioritize the Latin Mass. So anyway, I went on that tangent, of course, but the whole point is that, to your original question, I think was, well, what was your original question? I think I lost track of it at this point.
I think it had something to do with the exclusivity of
Yeah.
culture.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
And whether
Yes.
or not the exclusivity of culture in order to build a, something that's unified and ultimately beautiful, as opposed to like something that's more like open border, so to speak, and just like, it becomes just like a wash, a gray of just like everything, which sounds horrible, but on the flip, you might be able to make a case that, well, we want to get everybody. We don't want people to fall through the cracks because of, they didn't fit this little culture over here or that culture over here. Like we want to have a place where just anybody and everybody can fit in.
So okay, so
It's just like the pros and cons of
sure.
Either of those.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me back on track here. So I think it's inevitable. Okay, it's nice to start your new parish. Like there's a new parish being founded. They're about to build a new church in Corona area. It makes sense to be very broad because you don't know what your parish identity is yet.
Mm.
You're setting up. You're setting up at the local high school. Setting up an altar every Sunday for the Sunday Mass, and you tear it back up because it's going to be a school again on the weekdays. So there isn't really a thing. I mean, there is a community, if you will. They have picnics and they have events or whatever, but not a very consistent liturgical flavor to them yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as they get established, somebody's got to be the one to decide what the altar looks like and the front door looks like, or what the baptistry looks like. Somebody's deciding those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be probably related to the pastor, the parish council, or whoever it is, or whoever the pastor delegates and trusts that they have the same vision that they do, right? And then they build it, and it looks like that. And then they find musicians, and then it's gonna somebody at some it's not like it's random, like musicians just show up on Sunday. Somebody made the decision, we need a jazz band uh liturgy, or we need a rock band teen liturgy. That's becoming less and less a thing, it seems to me. Like the teen liturgy has phased out, it seems to me. They still call it the youth mass, but it's not like it was 25 years ago that I remember. um so so it's there is a value, I think, to the exclusivity, because you need to develop your identity as the parish, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason why people choose. They go to one parish, that's not really my thing. I go to that one, that seems more my thing. What is the thing? It's not just the mass. There's a whole layers upon layers of atmosphere and culture. I don't know, you call it culture or whatever it is, that just appeals to you. And I don't know, some people will try to intellectualize it, but I really think it's just kind of a intuitive thing. I know I'm an intuitive. I'm not a I'm not a what do you call it, the censor in the Myers-Briggs, but my intuition is that people go there and they just have a general sense, this feels right, or this feels comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And you either continue or you don't go. And then you go try the other one and you're like, this feels more right, or it feels less right, and I'll go back to the other one. It's just kind of that thing. I know it's sort of a Protestant mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Because back in the days, you just went to your local parish. Who cares how it looked? Because you didn't know any better. You didn't drive far away to go a different parish.
Mhm.
It's just not. This just wasn't the Catholic thing back in the day. But now, because of easy travel and ease of travel, people are willing to, you know, go further for their liturgical flavors. But the question is, how connected are you to that community? You drive an hour, you have 7 kids. Are you really spending a lot of time integrating with that community? Maybe, but less likely. It's more stressful. It's more taxing on you. When I went to the Eastern Orthodox, there's a local one that's really good, Father Josiah Trenham, very popular on social media, on YouTube. Josiah Trenham, he's a convert. He was a Baptist.
I'm envious that you live so close to him.
Oh, yeah, he's amazing. He's an amazing guy. Did a lot of interviews. You can look him up and whatever. He's
I've watched videos of his.
Impressive pastor. He's kind of known for the last 15, 20 years as this. I don't like the name, but people used to tell me, don't go to his parish. He's called the Catholic killer or the Catholic, I don't know, whatever. Basically, what they were saying was anytime a Catholic comes into his sphere of influence, they become Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not that kind of, I'll just get sucked into the thing because I know what the foundational issues are between Rome and the Eastern Orthodox. And as much as that community is attractive, and I made a video about this after I went to their Pascha, and it was a 4-hour liturgy. Can you believe it? I went there at 10 o'clock, and there somebody that I knew was there said, "Hey, come to the liturgy, but we're going to have the feast right after the Easter, and it's going to be at 2 in the morning." And I was like, "What?" All right. So I went to it, and it was like when I made my video, I was like, literally, I mean, I was so moved as I was expressing it to Catholics because I'm like, I don't think Catholics understand how serious the Eastern Orthodox experience their Pascha, their Easter. So when they shout out at that appropriate time, Christos Anesti, or whatever, everybody's yelling it in the church. There is a power there. There is an emotional thing there that it just doesn't feel the same as when I went to the Novus Ordo and people were yelling the same thing in English. Christ is risen. But it's like, because you're reading it from the missal. You know what I mean? It's because that's what you're supposed to say.
Mm-hmm.
It just has a different cultural feeling to it. And I was actually moved by it. And, if I didn't know any better doctrinally or historically, I would have been very attracted to just join that parish, that church, because of my perception of their exclusivity in the sense that they are different from Western Christians. They are different from other Christians, Protestants, and whatever. But that inclusivity of their community, they know each other. Their pastor knows all his congregation. There's something about that where your pastor knows who you are. And I recently went to an event from the Ordinariate. And when I first walked in, and I'm not part of the parish necessarily, but I was there for their fundraiser. And the pastor, Father Andrew Bardis, was on the mic, and he said, "If you're new or I don't know you, come and introduce yourself to me because I want to get to know you." Does that make sense?
Yeah,
even
that's
just
beautiful.
Even just echoing that right now, it's making me feel kind of emotional about it. Like, this pastor has an interest in me and wants me to be part of his thing because he recognizes the growth or the longevity of what he's doing is founded upon the investment or the feeling of I'm part of this thing. I'm part of this collective. Right? So it's not just one person, it's everyone on board with the same mission with the pastor. Wherever you're taking us, leader, pastor, whatever you want to call him, Father Bardis, wherever you're leading us, we're going, and we're behind you. It's not quite that same thing in the Novus Ordo. Everybody's fighting for power. Is my observation. Everybody's vying for leadership and power rather than trusting my pastor and moving forward with that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense? I mean, there's just That is a culture, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily Catholic culture. I would say because he's a convert from Anglicanism, that is actually Protestant culture.
Mm,
I'm impressed with that Protestant culture because I feel like, for me, that's attractive to me.
yeah.
That I want to be part of his thing.
I happen to really like Lutherans.
Oh yeah,
They're
yeah.
just they're just
There's a
so
thing.
hospitable, you know.
That's a good observation. Same thing with the Anglicans. When I visited the Anglican,
Really.
a famous Anglican church in Hollywood, Los Angeles, I brought my friends there, and they had a high liturgy, a high solemn. It looks like the Latin Mass, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
They had a high solemn, English, snooty Brits, I call them, right? Mass, and then right. I mean, even before the mass began, or they call it a mass. I don't believe it's a mass, but whatever. It's play mass. But from a Catholic perspective, of course, not trying to be insulting.
The service.
But a service. He introduced himself to us. Says, "Who are you? You guys are new." Because obviously his congregation's like 50 people. So he's like, "Who are these new people?" And they're young people. And he was giving us a little mini tour before about the history of the church and all the movie stars that used to go there back in the day. And then he said, "Stay after. We have a potluck right after the liturgy." And we were, yeah, delicious potluck. We felt welcomed. We felt that's not Catholic culture.
Yeah.
That's never been a Catholic. Like you go to a new Catholic church, they don't know who you are. They know that you're a stranger. I mean, they might not have never seen you before, but because the Catholic Church is so huge and the Novus Ordo is the mainstream, and there's so many masses, it's not uncommon that you see a new face, and they've been going to that parish for 15 years,
Yeah.
right? It's not quite the same thing as a small Protestant, community where a new face means let's get you in here, let's get you plugged in. Um,
It's interesting you mentioned size, um, really the smaller the community, the better. What is it that, well, there've been studies done on this, like you should only have like, what is it, 150 people in your circle or something for you to like, I forget what the benefit of that is, but there's some kind of like psychological benefit to only having that many
yeah,
people in your circle, because it's much more manageable. You can form closer connections. When you go beyond that, it's just too much to handle. Like I know I've got like what, 943 friends on Facebook, and I think there's no way I can know all of them.
yeah.
I scroll through my news feed, and I was like, oh, who's this person? I don't remember them.
I don't remember adding this person. Yeah, most of the, I have 659 people, and I keep an eye on that number pretty. I think sounds like you do too as well, because when you lose a few, you always post about it. So I noticed it too. I'm like, who's this person that decided I'm not good enough of a friend? But on the flip side, I do the same thing. I sometimes once a year I do my yearly purge, and I go in there and I'm like, who's this person? Like I've never noticed a thumbs up from this person or any kind of interaction. So that's usually my basis for like unfriend. I don't know
Mhm.
you. Like, who are you? Um,
Oh,
I mean, if I were
I
to
would
just,
unfriend like 3/4 of all my friends if I did that.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. There's probably only like 15 or 20 people that I, can say that has commented here and there. Um, but it's I also there's a part of it that's like, oh, I want them to be exposed to something I post just in case.
Hmm.
But there literal are people like, I have no connection to you. I have no common friends. I don't know why you added me. I mean, I accepted for some reason before, but I'm more judicious about it these days.
Hmm.
Like when I get an invite, I look at our common friends just so I know, are we somewhat on the same mindset or not?
Hmm.
And if not, if we have like one common friend and I'm not really too close to that, I'm not gonna decline. Sorry.
Yeah.
So anyway,
My vision for Catholic culture is one that has the commitment to, I like to point to Archbishop Sheen's distinction between the go-go's and the come-comes. So you've got the people who come into the faith, into like prayer, into liturgy, they receive, grace and whatever have you from God and from, just like the richness of the church. But then the go-go's are the ones who they go out into the world and they build like community, evangelism, and all those sorts of things, and culture. And so I I've often felt that there seems to be a bit of a divorce between those two things in the church. You've got the trads who are very much the come-comes, that's like stay around the liturgy, be fed by the liturgy and the prayer and all that sort of thing, which is wonderful. But then I get the feeling like that there's not a lot of like, at least it used to not be. I don't know if it's the case, if that's still the case with Gen Z, because Gen Z, the influx of Gen Z into the trad world has really changed things. But I know in the past there very much was not a sort of taking all the riches of the church and going out into the world and bringing it to the world, or even like the rest of the church, and just being like, hey, we've got all this great stuff, like you should really come and see that. But the Novus Ordo is like, they go out into the world, and then sometimes I feel like they just stay there, and they're just out in the world, and they're not much that different. They're not that much different from the world. It's like, okay, the world plus maybe like I don't know, That Man Is You program. I think that's kind of popular in a lot of parishes, So maybe that plus that. So there's not a lot of like spiritual wealth there, if you know what I mean. It's more of like it's like, yeah, we'll go out into the world, we'll bring Christ to the world, but then we sit in the world and we don't ever come back to Christ, and so we don't have Christ to give to the world. So I've often felt that there's like this split between that, and I would just love to see the two come together, where it's like, yeah, we have these like really tight, close church communities, and they're just so vibrant. It's the divine. It's also, here's another split. You've got the divine plus the human. You can probably imagine which group tends to favor one over the other. But it's both. Like God exists, but we also exist, and it's our relationship to God. So we need we really need to have both. We need to have the humanity, but also the divine presence. So I'm really all about balance.
Yeah.
And I think a good thriving Catholic community would be one that's balanced. So maybe like take the wealth of the prayers, the liturgy, the morality, just kind of these ancient treasures from the church, prior to Vatican II, but then combine that with the evangelistic, the new springtime, the joy of Vatican II, and just like go out into the world and bring that. I think if we had both of that, it would just be an unstoppable force. But unfortunately, we have a split.
The split. I think maybe the split is, I've mentioned this before, I think that the split is kind of a personality difference, right?
Mm.
So maybe people are attracted to the traditional mass because they're more introspective, or they're more, I don't know, spiritual. What do you say? The different intelligences from multiple intelligences theory. So they're more spiritually minded, or intrapersonal rather than interpersonal, right? So maybe they're more of the Novus Ordo-ish types, or at least the ones that are the main movers and shakers there are very outward oriented. They want to do, social justice type stuff, or they want to do, let's clean up the freeway activities or whatever. And, I think traditional minded conservative folks like kind of snicker about that and just think it's very this worldly. But like, it's not either or. I don't think it's either or. It's the balance that you're talking about, right? I think, we're not supposed to just be like, it's as if we're like happy to pollute this world because the next world is more important. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have to make this world beautiful too. I mean, if within your power, within reason, keep this, this community clean. We have an intuition for that, right? Even conservatives, they always talk about how the homeless are polluting the streets, and they're making it like, well, okay, well, you want to clean it up, right? So why are you like sort of knee jerk reaction to the care for this world kind of perspective of Francis, right? Maybe he was overly on that side rather than the care for the next world. Okay,
Hmm.
it's a matter of interpretation, but it's not either or, right? It's just like, in the Bible, right? Jesus is, Martha and Mary, right? Which one was Martha? Martha was the one that was like the busybody over in the kitchen,
Hmm.
and then Mary is just the one that's at Jesus' feet, just listening to his words. And Martha's like, "What do you?" She's like complaining, and he says it's not like it's equal though, but he says like she's chosen the better part because she
Hmm.
knows I'm only here for a time, right? So and I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm just going to say that I think this is like the mass, right? Jesus is with us for a time, and when we're at the mass, whether it's a Latin mass or Novus Ordo or Eastern Rite or whatever, Jesus is there for the moment. And for that moment, you are Mary. You're not thinking about social justice or recycling or the pollution in
Yeah.
the world. For that time, while you're at Mass, do what Mary does, right? You're choosing the better thing. But not that Jesus isn't there in other ways after the Mass, but we know there's gradations of presence of Jesus, of God, right? So after that, what do you do? What do you do in the world? What do you do for your school and your studies and your vocation in terms of um, career? And what about your vocation? Either you're married or you're single or whatever it is. All those other things are the Martha piece, right? It's the stuff that Martha was concerned about, but it's fueled by or it's nourished by the stuff that Mary does. Does that make sense? Like your
Yeah.
spirituality and how you're fed in the true in the when I say true liturgy, I don't mean like the Latin Mass only, as it's used sometimes. I just mean good, solid liturgy that has the right orientation about what the Mass is about. You're fed by that, you're nourished by that, and now you're spiritually equipped with whatever Paul talks about, the shield of faith and the helmet of salvation, all this other stuff.
Hmm.
Now you go out in the world and you do that stuff, and you do it based off of how you were nourished by the spirituality of Catholicism, right? So there is the um, the corporal works of mercy, and then there's the spiritual works of mercy. So I align the spiritual works of mercy to the orientation of Mary, and I align the corporal the spiritual works of mercy to the Mary personality, I guess you could say. And then
Hmm.
there's the corporal works of mercy, the stuff for the body, right? The physical um, needs of the person. I align that to the Martha kind of thing, right? The
Yeah.
physical stuff. And that's why we had a balance of contemplative nuns and active nuns, so called, right? They
Hmm.
were teachers, and they were the nurses, and they were out in the world. The contemplatives, were in the convent all day,
Yeah.
secluded. And it's not either or; it's a balance between the two. So same thing. And I don't think the individual. Some people are okay, and they have the skills or they have the natural talent to be balanced within themselves, to be both Martha and Mary at the same time. But I
Hmm.
also think some people are more better skilled and their personality is more attuned to being more contemplative or to be more active.
Hmm.
So within the context of a parish community, it should be open enough to say everyone's welcome, whatever talents and treasures that you have, come inside, but not just stay that way. Have some kind of organization and planning to say, how can we use the gifts of our community in a into an intelligent way, in a practical, efficient way,
Yeah.
to have that balance within the community, because some people are more skilled in one or the other or in the middle, somewhere like along those lines. Not just cast the net wide and just say, just come as you are and come as you, I mean, right. And then there isn't really any rhyme or reason or any direction or mission that's given to these people.
Hmm.
That's the job of the pastor, I think, to establish the mission. What is the mission of this parish? I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Is it true that in times past the parish was kind of like a community hub, kind of like the monasteries used to be
I think
in
so. Yeah.
and Saint Benedict's, that kind of vision is just, I mean, that's where it has to be, really. You start with the spiritual, and then you branch out and go out
Mm.
into the world. But it's so much harder these days because, you know, 80% of the world is hostile to the church. So I think it's, myself included, it's so easy to just like, well, I don't want to go talk to the woke people. Like, why would I want to do that? Like, they hate me. So like, why do I want to talk to them? But that's what has to happen. There has to be that one-on-one encounter. And there really has to be, I think, at the end of the day, even though they might protest otherwise, sometimes people are just looking for love. I think a lot of times, if they push back against the church because they think the church doesn't love them.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so when you have a parishioner who has been fed spiritually by God and his love and his sacraments and his grace, when you have them fed by that, and then they go out and they bring that love to the woke person, that is so much more effective than just like shouting on social media, the world's dying, and oh, the LGBTQ movement is so horrible. Like, no, you go out as an individual and you meet the people on the other side. But it takes a lot of courage, because I mean, it's kind of like the I don't know if you ever heard the scorpion story,
Mm.
where there's this man who tries to save this scorpion from, he's in the water or something, drowning. He tries to save the scorpion. The scorpion stings him, and then the man just keeps going back to the scorpion and keep trying to save him, and eventually he dies. um I mean, that's really, I think, a perfect analogy of, trying to go out to the world and actually evangelize them. But we don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, because who wants to get stung by a scorpion until you die?
Yeah.
But that's what needs to happen. And as
Well,
long as
maybe.
we just like hide in our bunker, so to speak, well, you're not gonna. Obviously, the world's going to get worse, because you're not out there planting the seeds, you're not out there watering them, you're not out there um, evangelizing them, and you're not building culture, and
Mm.
you're not making you're not going out there making the conversion
Mm.
to Christianity. So yeah, obviously
Yeah.
it's just gonna become hell, because you didn't bring heaven to it.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to be, it's case by case. I think you need to be discerning about it, because people have to be self-aware as to what their limitations are or their weaknesses, right?
Hmm.
Because you can have well-meaning, like, oh, I want to minister to the LGBTQ. Okay, we know from what's happened. I mean, not necessarily the Catholics, but there was this well-known, huge pastor, like mega church, like the mega church of mega churches back 20 years ago.
Hmm.
I won't necessarily mention his name, but um, um, he had a ministry to LGBTQ. Now, of course, he was very political, very much for the Republican Party and anti-LGBT, all that stuff publicly. And now, of course, a scandal came out that he was secretly, seeing. He's married, he has kids. He was secretly seeing, a gay prostitute or something like that, right? Doing
Hmm.
cocaine and all this other stuff. I'm just like, okay, well, how do you have that? I mean, I understand people have private sins and stuff like that, and they struggle with it, but there's got to be some question as to the sincerity of what he really believed on on the public side, as
Hmm.
opposed to there's an obvious disconnect there, right?
Yeah.
So maybe, even if he started off with good intentions, maybe he should not have been the main person in the LGBT in that ministry, right? It might have been a part of his church that he founded,
Hmm.
but it would not have been good, having recognized his own um failings, or whatever
Yeah.
whatever it is, that maybe he shouldn't be doing that ministry. He should be
Hmm.
doing another thing. Um,
Well, I have two thoughts on that. One is sanctifying grace If you're not Catholic, okay, Dr. K makes a good case for orthodoxy too. If you don't have sanctifying grace, then how are you going to stand up in the face of temptation? Because it really takes I believe a miracle to become a virtuous person and to resist temptation. It really takes a miracle, because left to our own devices, we just won't do it. That isn't to say you can't be better than some others, but eventually, you're just gonna, like, as we've seen, just degrade. Second, whenever you evangelize, you're building a bridge, and the goal is to walk across that bridge to the other side and bring people back. But that doesn't mean that, there's always the danger that you go out to the other side and you might get stuck there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And you might never. I mean, that's kind of my criticism of the Pope Francis era, his pontificate, is that he was very good about going out to the other side, but I held out for the longest time. I thought, okay, he's just evangelizing. He's like, he doesn't want to, like, scare them away. He doesn't want to look overly Catholic. But then eventually, towards the end, I realized, like, you know what? He's not coming back across that bridge. He's just staying out there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's kind of easy. I guess what my focus is not so much on, like, seeing other. I mean, we can only make examples out of the stories that we know, like when the scandals happen or something. We learn something from that. But I guess my focus is on, like, we need to take ownership of our own faults and failures and virtues and all this other stuff, right? Only we can see that, and God, of course. So nobody else can see that, because everybody only sees the best side of ourselves, or perhaps even the worst side of ourselves, depending on what's the most public of our personalities. But we don't 100% see everything about that person, even our closest friends, even our, if you're married, there might be people are bamboozled sometimes by their partners, even by their wives and their husbands, their secret stuff that they have behind, lurking underneath the surface. So at the end of the day, we have to kind of just take ownership of our own stuff going on, and if we are sincere, really set those things in place beforehand, before it becomes a temptation, and then it becomes a secret thing that you do, right? That apologist that was so popular just a few like last year, when it turns out he was using his ministry to predate or be a predatory person with women. He used his ministry for that, right? It could have easily been avoided, I think, if there was some kind of forethought to say, I have a thing, I'm really attracted to women, whatever, and I'm becoming popular, and I'm getting their attention, and they're beautiful, and all this other stuff, and they're single, and they're virtuous in many different ways, and they are attractive, right? But they have their own sinful natures that they're struggling against, and you have your own, and if you don't have the proper structures in place, things might happen, right? So it could have easily been avoided if he had no access to their information. He just comes in, gives his talk, no connection. I'm not going to dinner with you. I'm not going to lunch with you. I'm not meeting anybody outside of a big group. Those kind of things. I don't know. I'm not saying, I hope that doesn't seem like judging. I'm just saying that using that as an example, we need to put those things in place for our own situations. We shouldn't, if we're doing things at the church, we don't go off from our youth group or whatever it is and say, hey, let's go get some lunch, dinner alone, right, together, or something like that. That kind of thing. Those are things that you put in place, unless you don't have an intention, right? So you're recording and all this other stuff, and that's a whole subject for a different matter. The traditionalist idea of courtship versus dating in the modern secular Novus Ordo sense. So I know I went on another tangent. I'm sorry, but
no worries.
The point is that
basically know yourself, and some people are are just not suited to evangelism. But I think it's kind of a similar situation to the whole young people not getting married anymore. It's like
Yeah.
I've decided, at least for the foreseeable future, not to get married. But and but I would say that probably the majority of people are meant to get married, and they're not. So it's kind of the same thing with evangelism, I think. Like there are people who are, much more contemplative in nature and much more disposed to, being the comes and to growing like the church community. But that doesn't mean that there's still plenty of people who really should go out and evangelize, and they're probably not doing that. If that makes any sense.
No.
Um,
Yeah. So I mean, people need. I don't think there's a culture
and
that.
we also need the resources to do that too.
Yeah.
And I think that's again, that's like if the Novus Ordo was intended to like be the new springtime and go out and bring the church to the world, open all the windows and all that sort of thing, open all the doors. If it was intended to do that, because it lost its like interior contemplative, like, because it lost the comes, then it was not prepared to, it's no longer prepared to like actually go out and evangelize. So that's another element, is like we need we need to be fed before we can feed others.
That's a good point. I mean, you need to know what you're talking about before you. But practice makes perfect too. Everybody's going to be starting off and not know how to start a conversation, right? So, like when I share, like when I put stuff on Facebook or whatever, like, oh, this is what I did today, and people are like, oh, you're doing all this stuff. I'm like, I'm not intending. Like, I don't have this plan of evangelization necessarily. Like, I'm going to go to that farmer's market and I'm going to look for some atheists to have debates with. I mean, I don't go do that. What I do is I'm bored Saturday morning, and I think it's kind of cool going to the local farmer's market because I want to see what, maybe I could buy a candle or I don't know. Maybe there's a nice hummus stand that I'll try a new hummus flavor. So I've done those things, and it just so happens that there was a coexist table. Just a true story, a real example. There was a coexist table. I'm like, oh, let me have a conversation with these coexist people, see what happens. So I start talking. I'm not upfront. I'm not wearing Jesus shirts or a pectoral cross like I'm, some monk or something like that. So I'm already not a threat to them. And I start conversing with them. I see the books on their table, and I say, oh, look at this, look at that. Within 10 minutes, as it turned out, in that particular case, we were talking about Gregorian chant. I mentioned there is a Catholic church because he said his partner there was raised Catholic. And I said, hey, you sounds like you're interested in Latin. There is a Latin mass 30 minutes from here. It's at San Secunda de Asti. It's at 10:30 in the morning and 2:30 in the afternoon. You should go check it out. You might be interested. So here's an atheist or agnostic, who knows what. His partner is formerly Catholic or whatever. They're not anti-religion, but they're like all religions are one kind of deal, right?
Yeah.
And so all I'm saying is this person didn't have any knowledge about the Latin Mass or the Catholicism, had no interest. But he literally, as I was talking to him, he pulled out his laptop. He was doing a little Google, and he's like, where's Guasti? How far is it? And he was like, oh, we should go there. Like, I hear him nudging, like, we should go check it out. Now, I don't know what's going to happen after that because I'm never going to see them again. But they had an encounter that they didn't have unless I was there to provide that. And I didn't intentionally do that. I was just accidentally there. And that happens all the time for me. Like, because I have the equipment. I mean, I read some of these books that are behind me. So I know something about Catholicism and whatever. And so that's in my toolbox. And I just take the tool when it's appropriate and use it in my conversation, meeting these people who are not going to ever, I don't know. It doesn't seem like they would ever darken the door of a Catholic church.
Right.
But they might because of what I say. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? That's just one example. There's other examples. Like totally people like even I'm surprised myself. I went to another farmer's market kind of thing, and he was selling these offensive looking shirts. The designs were almost satanic, I would say.
Hmm.
And I started talking to him. Nose ring, tattoos, whatever it is that you might prejudge and say, this is probably not a person I would see at the Catholic Mass. But I
Hmm.
talked to him for 10, 15 minutes. At the end of that conversation, it sounded like, I was like, you sound like a conservative. Like he was talking about like abortion is wrong.
Really?
And if you were to ask me, like to like make a prejudgment, I'm like, oh, he's definitely pro-choice. He's definitely pro-satanic. He's definitely like, because that's the costume that he's wearing. It
Hmm.
seems to me. I would come to that unfair conclusion. But as it turned out, he believes in good family values. He didn't necessarily practice them historically, but he believes in it like as an ideal. Like
Hmm.
he has a son, he wants to raise him right, good values. But at the end of that conversation, he was like, you know what? We should start a podcast. Like he's a stranger. I only met him 10 minutes, 15 minutes ago. He was like, oh, we should start a podcast. And I know this skate shop in downtown Riverside. I should invite you, and then they could answer they could ask you questions, and you could give them whatever. I'm like, I wasn't intending to start a podcast going to that farmer's market or making a new friend. But it would be an interesting idea. Now, where that goes from there, if he's really sincere about that, that's on him, because I did follow up with him. I did text him. I got his phone number. He got mine. I did text him because he sounded really excited about doing something at that board shop. Like he wanted to do a podcast
Hmm.
and events. But I followed up with him, and he responded a couple of times, but it fizzled.
Yeah.
And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I like to hold people accountable. When people say, hey, let's go catch up, I follow up in a few days. I say, let's go.
Yeah.
A lot of people just say that, hey, let's catch up, let's go do this thing, and they don't
I
really mean
know
it, or they mean it, but they don't follow through.
it bugs me so much, because they just say it to be nice,
Yeah.
and then they don't really mean it. And then I think like, no, it would have been nicer if you had told me, no, I'm not interested, because you wouldn't have wasted my time, me trying to like, okay, are they trying to figure out like, okay, are they really interested? Are they just busy? Or do they like not want to do this? Yeah, it bugs me so much. So
Yeah, it happens.
uh
But you throw it out there, and it might happen, it might not happen. Just that shouldn't cause us to not take the opportunity, right? In my opinion,
right,
because
right.
there might be that one person that is and just needed a nudge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's
Yeah.
true. We'll have a closing question for you. Where do you think the church culturally, not like the hierarchy or anything like that, just from the bottom up culturally, where do you think it's headed in the next 5 years?
Um, you know, um, I've had a lot of high hopes in the 20 years I come back to the church. I thought Benedict was going to start a revolution back towards conservatism, and then Francis brought it, a certain way. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard for me to predict because um, I would there's people who would have been so like anti SSPX mentality during the John Paul II, Benedict XVI time period, but because of their hurts during the Francis era, they become more traditionalistic minded,
Mm, mm-hmm.
or maybe I shouldn't say that. They're not necessarily pro TLM, but they're more critical of the hierarchy than they were during Benedict XVI or John Paul II.
Yeah.
Because I think their foundation, and I'll plug this book since we're running out of time. I don't know if you see this in the right way, or it's backwards, but I'll just read the
It's,
title.
it's blurred out. You have to hold it closer to your face. Smoke of Satan. I think I've heard of that
Yeah.
book.
It's called Smoke of Satan by Michael W. Cuneo. I don't think he's Catholic, but he is a sociologist. And he wrote this book. The subtitle is Conservative and Traditionalist Dissent in Contemporary American Catholicism. So I read this before, but I kind of perused through it again just to remind me what the point was. So he categorizes a lot of the critical resistance type Catholics that are more on the right.
Mm-hmm.
sociologically. So he talks about the Marianists, or whatever you call it, like the people who are so focused on the Marian apparitions. That's a particular right subculture. Then there are the radical traditionalists that are the separatists. He called it the separatists. He's probably talking about the SSPX types that
Mhm.
that reject authority, but also they want to do their own thing. They're separatists.
Mhm.
And then he categorized conservatives. So conservatives are, and he doesn't have a space for the mainstream traditionalists. So somewhere they're in between the conservatives and the what he calls the separatists. But anyway, what he called the conservatives, I align more of like the, I don't know, the EWTN type conservatives that were not necessarily pro TLM in the 2000s. I don't know if you kind of know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
These are Orthodox type Catholics who want to be, in line. So they used to have this phrase, "Sentiri cum ecclesia." I want to think with the church.
Mhm.
I'm not liberal, but I'm also not a traditionalist, like looking to the past only as the way forward. So
Right.
they are these conservatives. But these conservatives that were EWTN conservatives have now become sort of EWTN traditionalists.
Mhm.
And suspicious of Francis and hoping for the best with Leo the 14th, but there's so they might still have high hopes, but they are certainly more right than they were 10-15 years ago. Anyway,
Right.
all that to say, I don't know, because I think we're still too early with what the face of Leo the 14th is, or whatever his style is.
But what about
Honestly, I haven't been following it.
what about the people though? Like not the hierarchy. Like who knows where the hierarchy will go?
Well,
But
that's the thing. It's like
like with from the ground up, with the average layman, just like what are what's the temperature of those waters and what direction is it like heading in? Big question.
I think it's hard to answer that question when so much of how the laity are is in response to how the papacy is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if they feel okay, if their comfort zone, so everyone has their comfort zone. So the traditionalists have their comfort zone. I stay in my Latin mass. I like Athanasius Schneider as my cleric of choice, or Bishop, or Cardinal Burke, or Bishop Strickland, or Cardinal Vigano. I mean, those are all different flavors, right? They have their heroes, and they stay within those circles. So if they feel like the mainstream or the hierarchy isn't really in line with that, they're going to stick within their folks. So their hierarchy is basically, the Burke types or the Cardinal Sarah or whatever, whoever their favorite is. That's their hierarchy. Look at the way they talk in the chat rooms, right? Or the chat boxes or whatever. They talk as if their favorite cleric is their pope.
Yeah.
That's how they talk about it. It's like, so Bishop Strickland is your pope. Bishop, whatever, Bishop Arian is your pope, kind of, almost, I guess you'd say, because they pay more attention to Bishop Barron than they pay attention to the Pope necessarily. Anyway, my point is to say, I think people like to be comfortable. They like to feel safe. It's not easy being Catholic.
No.
You have to sacrifice a lot of things because we are by nature flesh oriented in our sin natures, right? And so if you want to be legitimately faithfully Catholic, you have to say no to a lot of things your body wants you to do or telling you should be, right? So you have to, if you're going to be sincere about it, you're making up a lot of sacrifices to say I'm committed to Catholicism, right? So if the hierarchy is threatening my sense of security and sort of contrasting with the fact that I am making here's the reason why the conservative traditionalists are so upset, I think, with the Francis pontificate, is because here we are trying to maintain the faith, promoting orthodoxy, promoting good behavior, orthopraxy, and then you have Father Martin over there doing whatever he wants to do. And not just Father Martin, all the type of liberal, right, liberal mainstream heroes of the left within the church, it doesn't seem like they get chastised by the hierarchy.
Yeah.
So when a conservative or a traditionalist sees that and they see their own group being chastised, their Latin mass being shut down, their altar rails being destroyed, you can't kneel for communion. They're like, the church has betrayed me, right? It's in some way. That's their feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they see over there, they're letting them do whatever they want. It doesn't make it right one way or the other, right? It's still, there might be a legitimate chastisement of the traditionalists and the conservatives, but the mere fact that they see that the liberals are not being chastised when they are also violating canon law or violating the teaching of the church, I get why they feel insular. Like they feel like, I don't feel like I'm safe with the mainstream hierarchy, so I'm just going to stay in my own group. So long way to answer your question. What is the future? I think people are just going to stick with their groups, and they're going to follow the group think within those groups. There's always going to be an alpha of those groups. I've been saying for a while now, I think Dr. DPK is an alpha within the traditionalist movement. He just is.
Yeah.
So we can't discount him. We can't, if you disagree with him, we can't just ignore him. He is a leader, a thought leader within that community. So insofar as we don't have influence over him and we just kind of ignore him, he's going to continue leading folks in that direction. But if you have influence and say, hey, maybe you should pull back a little bit. Maybe that's a little too extreme. Maybe we shouldn't promote the SSPX so much. Then you have influence. You have a possibility of influencing if you stay within his sphere. Anyway, there's always going to be alphas. People are going to follow those things. My opinion is the best thing for me to do that has worked for me is to stay outside of all these groups and just every once in a while dip my toe in all of their little kiddie pools. But don't drink, have a taste of their Kool-Aid, but don't drink the whole cup.
Yeah. It's like alcohol. Drink a little and you'll feel good. Drink a lot and you'll have a bad hangover the next day.
That's my opinion. But I couldn't do that if there wasn't any people who are 100% traditionalist or 100% conservative or 100%, right? For me, I need those people so that I can be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Because if everybody's in the middle, there is no middle.
That's true. I even though I think of myself as more like centrist, somebody like Nancy Pelosi, I'm probably a fascist.
I don't know enough about, I'll probably have to talk to Philip Campbell or whatever. I'm not really big in politics. So this fascist versus, authoritarian terms have been thrown both ways. And I'm a little confused because yes, the fascists and the neo-Nazi right there, but in some sense, I mean, of course they're communistic or whatever it might be, or even the communists or whatever. These terms have been thrown out so many ways in so many directions. But isn't it true that these groups are authoritarian and it tends to be that right-minded politics tends to be more authoritarian?
Well, it depends on whether or not you consider Joseph Stalin to be left or right.
I mean, maybe he's publicly left-oriented, but he's definitely an authoritarian.
Yeah, and communism is generally thought of as a left-wing ideology. So if you put those two together, then they're quite authoritarian as well. But here's the thing, like, I think they call themselves two very different things. The authoritarians on the right are very much like open about it. I think they're like, well, we're just like, this is the law and we're making it right. The authoritarians on the left are very authoritarian under the name of being anti-authoritarian, if that makes any sense. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, you're impinging on our rights, so off to the gulag with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're praying in front of an abortion mill, so off to jail with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you're impinging on the rights of a young woman to go to Planned Parenthood without being like, without seeing somebody who is praying in their mind, you know, because that might be traumatic to them.
Mm-hmm.
So they both end up being authoritarian. It's just the people on the left pretend that they're against the authoritarians, but they end up being just as authoritarian in the process.
Yeah, so maybe my critique would be maybe we should be less supportive of authoritarian approaches in general.
Well, that would be the very American approach. I know there's a lot of like voices out there emerging who are saying the American project, the American democratic project has failed. We need a new solution. And those solutions, whether it be left or right, are very authoritarian.
Oh, are they really? Okay.
Yeah, well, you know, on the left, you've got like communist dictatorship, and on the right, you've got like return to monarchy.
Right. Yeah,
you know, Catholic. Let's have a Catholic monarchy, you know, or as Nick Fuentes supposedly is in favor of like the Catholic Taliban.
Who's the family? Who's going to be the chosen family to be this new monarchy of the?
I know, right?
Is it going to be? It's going to be the Trump. It's going to be King Trump. I don't know.
King Trump.
Who knows? I mean, I spent a little bit of time associated with the TFP.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with the TFP.
Oh yes.
And they're very big on the monarchy idea, right? A lot of their events always has a prince or some kind of monarchy connected person from Brazil, which is kind of cool. I mean, I went to one of their events and they sat me right across from Prince Bertrand from Brazil, I believe it was, at dinner. So here I am, a lowly peasant, lay person. They sat me in front of, across the table from the prince. But it was always interesting to me, but I never saw it as something practical. Like, I mean, here in the context of the United States, like the whole point of the founding of the United States was to get away from monarchy, right? Get away from authoritarian control, right? Independence or whatever. But at its core, it is a anti-authority movement, right? Democracy is not quite a Catholic concept, right? Historically, I mean, if you follow the philosophy of the TFP, there are three historic revolutions, right? There was the Protestant Revolt, the Protestant Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Enlightenment, and there was the Communist Revolution. So you first get rid of the authority of the Pope in the Protestant Reformation. Then you remove the authority of civil authority or civil government, which is the kings. You cut their heads off, and then you get rid of all hierarchy altogether in the Communist Revolution. So everyone's allegedly, in theory, equal. So according to their philosophy, you see this trajectory of getting rid of hierarchy.
Yeah.
And then the fourth revolution, they say, is the phase of tribalism, where we degrade back to caveman. You know, we're just tribes vying for power or whatever it might be.
Well, that's exactly what you predicted the people of the church are going to grow into.
Now that you pointed out, hey, there you go. The influence of the TFP have come back to mind.
That's the fourth.
Tribal.
Say what?
I mean, it is tribal if you look at it that way. Yeah, we're just going to stay in our little tribes, and then wait it out.
Yeah,
I don't know. Who knows?
Fun world we live in.
That's probably a topic for a whole hour else. TFP philosophy.
We'll have to
which
do
made
that
a lot of
next
sense
time.
to me. Let's say my time with the TFP, a lot of their ideas made a lot of sense to me. And they're very straight to the point. Their books are very thin. but very incisive
Mhm.
in their analysis. So
Yeah. I love the fact that they wear suits, although they probably wouldn't wear a purple suit.
yeah, probably not. But any kind of suit's better than no suit, I guess, from their perspective.
It's true. It's true. So, well, Lawrence, thank you again for a wonderful hour-ish of conversation about just Catholic culture and how we can rise above heartless materialism. And until next time, thanks so much.
Thank you.